Hey there friends, thanks for joining me again, and today I want to talk to you about the importance of hardening off your plants. Basically, that's the process of taking your plants that are kind of tender and toughening them up to be able to handle the outdoors. So when they're grown in a greenhouse or inside, whether you start them from seed or you buy them from a nursery, they're going to be kind of tender. They have never experienced lots of wind, they've never experienced full strong sun, they've never experienced a lot of the insects that we have out here, and so there's a lot of things that they're going to have to deal with. So what we need to do is to make those plants that are kind of young and tender a little bit tougher before we actually plant them in the garden. Because if you've ever taken your plants, again, whether they're, started from seed in your own home, your greenhouse, under lights, whatever, or if you've bought them from a garden center and brought them in, if you've ever had experienced, again, planting them in the ground only to have them wilt, or even die, it's probably because they haven't been properly hardened off. So it's like if you were to have a baby, you wouldn't have a brand new newborn little baby, take it home, and then immediately take them out camping, would you? Of course not. Well, those plants that we get from the greenhouse or our own greenhouse or whatnot are in the same way very tender, and they need to be, again, toughened up some. So this can be a little bit of a tricky process because it really depends on what the weather is like, and then of course there's people's schedules, and I have dealt with it all. So I've had weather good in some years, I've had weather that was terrible to try to harden off in, I've had a full-time job where I had to be somewhere at 9 to 5 and still trying to harden off my plants, and then I've had other times when I have a work from home job and I'm able to bring them in and out more, frequently if needed. So I have some tips no matter where you live or whatnot, what your weather is like or what your schedule is like. You can do this. It's not going to be too terribly difficult. So the first thing I would say is that you're going to want to bring your plants, again, outside or home, and put them in the shade. So if you work a full-time job, you're going to want to put it maybe on the north side of your house where it's going to be shade all day long, not just somewhere where it's shade in the morning, because if you put it on, say, the west side and it's shade in the morning, but then, afternoon comes and then the sun is really strong on that side of the house, they could wilt very easily, and then you're not there to take care of them. So put them either on the north side of the house or under a big tree where it gets a lot of shade. So I would do this for a few days just to help them get used to it. And, depending on what the weather is like, you're going to want to maybe bring them in at night, depending on how cold it is. If it's mild, you could probably leave them outside. If it's cold or if it gets windy or there's a chance that it could rain or hail or anything like that, definitely want to bring them inside. So after a few days of that, of mostly shade, I would put them in something like a dappled shade. I have a tree here that's actually in the middle of my deck, and so it's like the perfect place to put it because it'll get just a little bit of sun in the morning where it's not going to be too intense, the sun isn't too intense, and then for the middle of the day, in between the leaves, it does get a little bit of dappled shade, but then dappled sun to sort of transition it to getting more used to the sun. And then a few days after that, I will put them in a spot where it'll get actually some pretty good sun for maybe an hour or two, and then shade the rest of the time. And then for a few more days, I'll give them, a half day of sun and then shade for the rest and so on. But again, this can be tricky. So you might have to watch the sun lines at your house and see where there's shade and where there isn't. And so, you can kind of transition them a little bit, slowly. Some plants are a little bit more tricky than others. Say tomatoes, I have not had too much trouble hardening those off. They're actually pretty decently tough, and I haven't had too many issues with that. However, peppers or cucumbers, they seem to take quite a bit longer. So tomatoes I can usually harden off in a week, and peppers and cucumbers and other squashes, pumpkin, zucchini, things like that, winter squashes, summer squashes, alike, I tend to have to take about 2 weeks with those. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Some will take a little more time than others. Another thing you're going to want to consider is water. Water is definitely something that's going to be an issue with this, because when they're outside, they're going to have a lot more evaporation than they did in your greenhouse, in the greenhouse where they were grown, etc. So one of the things I like to do is to pick a tray, not like this one, where the water drains really quickly, but a tray like this where there aren't any holes in it. It's a solid tray, And then I'll actually put just a little bit of water in the bottom. I don't normally like to leave my plants sitting in standing water because of root rot reasons, but just for the week or two when I'm transitioning them, especially if I have to work. Again, if you have a work from home job, this probably isn't as crucial if you can check on them a little bit more often. But again, if you have to work outside the home, this will help you have more success. Put them in some sort of a solid tray. It doesn't have to be an actual plant tray like this. If you only have a few you're putting out, you can just use a plastic container that some kind of a baked good or something came from the grocery store in, or whatever. You can get creative and find something, I'm sure. Put your plants in this with just a little bit of water in the bottom to make sure that they stay moist, because if they dry out, that's definitely going to make them stressed out, and you don't want that. I actually read a article a while back from a greenhouse somewhere where they had actually tested plants that had wilted versus plants that had not wilted, and they proved that plants that had wilted actually were less productive during their entire lifetime, even after you watered them and they perked back up or whatnot. They were more productive in their lifetime than a plant that had not wilted. So keeping them from wilting is pretty important. Not that they can't bounce back, so don't lose heart if they do. If you end up with a wilt, that's okay. They'll only be a little bit less productive. It wasn't huge, but the point is that they can be more productive if they don't wilt. So if you can avoid that, definitely try for it. So water them real good, even put them in a tray with just a little bit of water so that they don't end up, with any issues from the water not being there. And then you're going to want to watch them for insects, because once you put them outside, I have this happen every single year. I will put them outside and aphids are like, the peppers are back! And so they immediately start attacking my peppers. So unfortunately, I just have to, kind of watch it, and just if I see any, maybe like crush them or flick them off or whatnot. I can also get them off with the hose sometimes, just when I'm watering them, give them a good, hard jet of water. And so, yeah, that's not too difficult to do, hopefully. Most people can do it with their schedules, and, just kind of do it slowly, just to get them a little bit more used to being outside. That way you don't end up with any of your plants dying, especially if you had to buy them. You wouldn't want to lose, the money from having bought them to have to replace them again, or if you started them from seed, I'm sure you don't want to lose them either. So hardening off your plants can help ensure good success with your plants, where you won't have to have any kind of losses and everything will be successful, your plants will be happy, and then you'll have a nice productive garden. So I'm Frugal Green Girl, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.